Hello guys, welcome back to the second part of this video. I assume that you guys have already watched the first video because in the first video there are like 4 or 5 questions that are covered there, and this video will cover the rest of it, and in the end I will give you some tips that you can keep in mind while you're answering the questions during the interview. So I really hope this video is also helpful for you. So yeah, let's get into it. Obviously, there are a lot of majors in the GKS scholarship program. You have majors from science, social science, liberal arts, humanities, arts, everything is there, right? So be ready to expect some technical questions. So for example, if you're from a science background, like if you're applying for a biology major, if you're applying for chemical, like from chemistry or for engineering majors or any other such majors, be ready to expect some technical questions depending on what you have written on your study plan. A lot of times applicants, they are not very well aware of what's there in the study plan. So the answer they try to frame while being in the interview, a lot of time it completely deflects from what they have already mentioned in the study plan. So always try to stay on point, always try to stay in relation with what you have already mentioned in your personal statement and study plan, because you cannot deflect too much. You can elaborate on what you have mentioned there while you are asked a question and you're answering, but you cannot completely go on opposite poles apart while answering. So have a very clear idea of what you have written in your study plan and in your personal statement, and then while answering, stick to that. So be ready to expect, they will ask you technical questions. For example, in my case also, since I was switching from psychology to international trade and we have a lot of finance and business papers, he was very curious to know, because I also studied statistics in psychology, so he was very curious to know what all I covered. He asked me a lot of questions from statistics. He also asked me about my background in mathematics, right? So they'll just be ready to expect a lot of technical questions. So no matter which field you're applying for, they might ask you technical questions. But like I said, it depends on university. So a lot of people, they don't ask technical questions, but a lot of people they do. So just keep that in mind. Also, if you have mentioned work experience, like if you're a working professional and if you have mentioned your work experience, they will ask about your work experience and questions about what your roles were, what responsibilities you had, and how you manage them. So these type of questions are also pretty common, especially if you're going for an MBA or for a management degree, because for example, in my case also I had internship and other experiences. So they did ask me about my experiences, the roles, responsibilities I did, how I coped up with that working environment and everything. So just be ready for that too, especially for the MBA and management people, if you're applying for those programs. Also, it's very important that if you did a thesis in your undergraduate, and if you're applying for masters, in second situation, if you did a thesis, obviously a lot of people do thesis in masters, and if you're applying for a PhD, so you should be very well aware with your thesis, because a lot of time they do ask you questions from thesis. But for example, in India, the undergraduate universities, most of them, they don't have thesis, right? So then you don't submit a thesis with your application. But for other countries where you have thesis in your undergraduate, and if you're submitting it, then they will ask you questions related to that, specifically in the STEM field. So in the STEM, people who are applying for STEM majors, they should be ready to face some technical questions and to face some academic questions related to your field. And people who are from liberal arts and management and other fields, they should also be ready to expect some questions in one way or the other. So just be prepared for that, and be at least, and they are not going to ask you anything very difficult. They're just going to ask you something which you have already mentioned in your study plan. Again, they are not going to go beyond. They are only going to ask you, all the questions are framed around your application. So the more aware you are, I know it's your application, you have already filled your application, but just filling the application and being completely aware of what your application is all about and how you have completely filled every detail and written the personal statement and study plan are two different things. So you should be completely aware, and you should have that 100% realization of what you have written, and then you'll be able to answer pretty well to every question that they ask. And the very last question that they ask is, what is your future plan after you graduate? Or where do you see yourself after 5 years? Where do you see yourself after 10 years? These are some of the most basic questions that they ask you towards the end of the interview. So this is completely equivalent to what you have written in your future plan, the future plan that you submitted in your study plan. You just talk about it and that's it. And these days, most of the interviewers ask you that if you have any question for us, you can ask us. Now, a lot of people say we don't have, I don't have any question for you, just don't say that, okay? Because that kind of shows that you don't have a lot of interest, because they are asking you just one question to ask them. So they're giving you an opportunity to know about their, like for example, their laboratory, their department, their university. So it's a really good opportunity for you to talk about it. So in that case, even if you don't have any questions, just do some research and try to frame a question that you can ask. For example, in my interview, because during the head of my department, like international trade and business, so he did some research work and I studied his papers, and I also mentioned those papers in my study plan. So when he was asking me questions about it, and towards the end when he asked me the same question, that do you have any question for me, so I did ask him about that research itself and about the lab and the department's stuff and like academic stuff and everything. So make sure that you do some research, and then as long as you're done with your research, you have some questions prepared. At least prepare one question which is like a really specific and towards the university or towards that department or towards the laboratory that you'll be working for, and then you ask the person, because the interviewers feel really good and it just shows them that you are totally invested, involved and aware about the university and the department. So never say that you don't have a question. Even if you don't have, just get a question prepared beforehand and then ask it when the interview happens, or if the interviewer asks you that questions. And now in the last part of the video, just like very few tips, I think. Yeah, these are the tips, just keep in mind. Now, the questions that I did mention, a lot of people, what they do usually is that they prepare an answer, they tend to memorize it, and then they present themselves in the interview itself. Now, what usually happens with memorization is that when you memorize stuff, to keep with the pace of how you have memorized it, you just keep on talking. You just keep on talking, and then your answer is complete. And you feel, oh, I'm very confident, I answered perfectly. But while you were speaking, it was so evident for the interviewer to notice that it's so monotonous and it's so it's a memorized answer. Okay, you have completely memorized this. It's very visible because you didn't make it sound natural. So even if you memorize, there is a way of talking, there's a way of speaking. So if you're talking in an interview, even if you have memorized, and if you don't memorize, if you just keep points in your mind, that's the best thing, because if you have points in your mind, you can just frame it on the spot and can answer, and that's the best way to answer. But if you have memorized your answers, then I would say the best way is to make it sound natural in a way, so that they, like how you generally talk. So if you have memorized an answer, and when you are giving your answer, when you are just speaking, take pauses, okay? Change the tone. At some places you're going on a high pitch, some places you're going on a low pitch. Take proper pauses, okay? While you're taking a pause, try to show that you're trying to think. Although you're not thinking, but you're kind of acting that you're trying to think. So these are some of the ways where you can make that answer more natural, and you can make it sound more natural. But if you just keep on talking, it's just going to be very monotonous. And second most important thing is that although a lot of people who apply for English majors and a lot of people who apply for Korean majors, so most of the interviews are in English, right? So if your interview is in English, and even if your major is in English and the professor who will be taking your interview knows English, it is always best to talk at a general speed. Don't talk very fast, don't talk very slow. Talk in a way so that the interviewer is satisfied with your answer and can understand what you're trying to say. Because when you see the interviewer, and if the interviewer is not understanding, you'll get an idea that the interviewer is not getting hold of what you're trying to say. And that's not really good. So even if your answer is really good, and if you're really well aware of your application, if the interviewer does not understand what you're trying to say and what you want to relay, like the message you want to relay, there's no point of it, right? So when you're trying to give the interview, try to see how the interviewers are acting. Usually it's pretty evident. If they don't understand, it's evident. Sometimes the interviewer even say that we cannot understand, can you elaborate again? But if you just talk in a way where you are talking at a normal speed and you're making yourself very clear, as long as you're doing that, it's completely okay. And the very last tip that I would give you is that don't use very hard vocabulary. Okay, It's not like if you use very difficult words or if you like use very different vocabulary, it's gonna make your answer look really good. Again, the key point is to relay the answers, relay the messages, relay the actual content that you want to, right? And for that, even if you're talking in basic English with basic vocabulary, but you are able to, completely and cohesively relay the message that you want to, you're doing a really great job. So just talk in the most basic, natural, and comfortable way you can, and then you're just going to ace the interview. Yeah, so that's it for today's video. I really hope you guys find this video useful. And yeah, so if you like this video, give it a big fat thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed it yet. Until I see you again, bye bye.